Ruben, over to you. So Ruben has been involved in writing the design handbook, if you like, for FIFA. Is famously been known to during that Soccerex convention in the UK, when he proposed that Manchester City and Manchester United could actually use one sporting ground, actually like Inter and AC Milan do actually at San Siro. They do the same thing. But let me not speak for him. He's more than able to speak for himself. He is with Mike Bull, who has been instrumental in many of his projects as well. Ruben, over to you.
Mike.
Should I carry on?
Next show.
Mike, over to you. Okay. Thanks very much. I've had, as I mentioned, this is 30 years I've been waiting to talk about Ruben and him keep his mouth shut. He has to keep his mouth shut. So I just want to talk quickly about the project that we were involved in, which was such a seminal project in all our lives and for the city, the ICC. Ruben was a board member of that project, and he proved what for me is a truism, is that architects make the best clients, because he played an absolutely fantastic role in understanding the dynamics and all the various interplays that go into making a complex project like that happen. The project was approved in '92. We submitted a report which had no drawings in. That caused a massive problem for people like Robbie Stewart as the QS. He had to do an estimate, and he said, how the hell do I do an estimate without any drawings? And we said, well, just get on with it. And he did. A couple of months later, it came to a grinding halt because the new political movements said, no, we're not going to spend this on some Lani development, rather spend it on housing. So they handed over all our reports. And I think, Ruben, you were part of that. And 6 months later, they came back and said, go, unanimous approval. I think that probably the grounding to that was that our mantra was we're building a business, not a building. And that's where Ruben played such an important role as the built environment professional, because he could see what was going on and the various role players, bearing in mind that they set up a board which consisted of, let's call it established councillors and the new emerging persons who were coming into political significance for the first time. And if you talk about a diverse group, Ruben, you'll agree with me, it was absolutely extraordinary. Ruben's first look at me, Rook says 1,000 words. Ruben's was about 5,000 words. But the board was so diverse, but it was under the chairmanship of Richard Moore as a city engineer. And all he did was he said, listen, we just carry on. Meeting carries on. Some meetings went on for a day, 2 days. And until such time as we reach consensus, we're not stopping this meeting, or we will stop it and we'll reconvene. But within about 8 months or so, 8-9 months, that just changed dramatically. It was all of a sudden, everybody was on the same page. And there was a collegiate atmosphere in that board, which I have never, ever experienced in any client. They respected all of us. And as I say, the rule was we're going to deliver an international ICC. So there were plenty of challenges. We introduced the construction protocol, which was the first sort of attempt towards black contractors getting involved. It became the forerunner for affirmative procurement and targeted procurement. And you can imagine there were challenges aplenty. But we stuck to our guns and we got on. So it took from the time, the get-go to the time that Madiba opened it was 45 months. That's quite extraordinary. A project that's in 270 million then is equivalent of 3.5, 4 billion today. That's not bad. So in that time, I mean, there were a lot of, as you say, Ruben's had some challenging times in his life, and we became colleagues and friends over that period, and that relationship has stayed. We're very, very different, but we're pretty much on the same page, and I find that quite humbling, and I really cherish it. Ruben's, you know, his love of sport is legendary. And I mean, those who knew his father, who was really Mr. Cricket and Mr. Kingsmead. And you mentioned it, the World Cup 2010 organizing committee, incredible amount of hard work, and played an important role. But then we come to the subject of today's presentations, which were his travels to Russia. And nobody was traveling to Russia except Ruben. And he kept sort of a bit quiet about it. I don't know whether everybody remembers all this. There were lots spoken about, the names of places that we'd never heard of. And we said, no, come on, man, you know, let's get to do this. And if I remember rightly, Ruben, I think we said at the time, I said, if you do that, I'd like to give the intro. And this was years ago that we spoke about this. So here we are today. So Ruben's passion for sport is legendary, as is his passion for architecture. Incoming SAIA president is just reward for his efforts and his passion for his profession as well. But I guess if you really want to see what Ruben's true passions, have a look at the photograph on his WhatsApp. Ruben and his 3 precious daughters. Over to you, Ruben. Sir Ruben.
Thanks, Mike. Probably my greatest design. I mean, after all of those words, it's like difficult to say anything about myself. So I'm going to just run with this thing. I mean, I think it will be remiss if we didn't acknowledge what happened in the last month. It was the biggest crisis of our democracy. And it would have been just totally inappropriate if we had to have this talk about let the games begin. A couple of weeks later, we all lost a dear friend, colleague. It's been really, really trying times. So I think one thing that Ntimbeni would have wanted is that for us to just go on and improve the lives of people that he worked very hard for in his life. So I think we owe this one to him. Okay. So stay in the games. So where does this all start? For me, it started. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet, Ruben. Just share and give it a few minutes. It will take up.
Come on. You're going to put cameras off.
I can't see it from my side, Ruben.
It'll just take a couple.
Still can't see the screen?
Give it time, it will come.
No?
Now it's on, Ruben.
That's
Okay.
on.
So where did this all start for me? It started here. While there's argument around how sports architecture happened in the world and people go back to the Colosseum, nobody knows who did that building. And there was a big gap in the history around sports buildings. And then all of a sudden, architects became really famous in sports buildings. And it started in 1936 with Otto March and Albert Speer. And remember that name, Albert Speer, because we'll talk about it again just now. And then a couple of years later, and the kind of significant thing about all of this is that Kenzo Tangi's buildings that hosted the 1964 Olympic Games were significant structures. Again, architects actually impacting on otherwise engineers' terrain. And then there was a gap again. And in 72, Bernish to that beautiful stadium in Munich to host the Munich Olympic Games. And ever since then, there's been a regular kind of involvement of architects in sports buildings, slowly and quietly wedging a space which was pretty much occupied by engineers. And so when this opportunity arrived for me in 1995 to go to Cape Town and be part of the team that looked at particularly the facilities that were required for the games. And at the time, Cape Town had very few facilities, nowhere near the facilities that were required to host the event. And Terry Bracey and I were the two appointed consultants to look after the packaging of this bid book. Actually engaged some 250 consultants in the Western Cape, and a mixture of architects and engineers and quantity surveyors and project managers, teams that on some of the facilities were 15 and above. And the significant thing about this experience for me is that we engaged, because Mercedes-Benz was a major sponsor of Cape Town's bid. They sent to Cape Town at our request an engineer who's also an architect, an old guy called Knut, who came down to write briefs for us. So we thought, German, he's going to come there with all the technology, and he's going to be typing away. There's going to be massive amounts of spreadsheets and pie charts and all sorts of things associated with briefing documents. And here was this man with a weathered leather briefcase and pulled out a writing pad, those yellow ones, and proceeded to write by hand a brief for a stadium, an outdoor stadium, and a brief for an indoor facility. And we used those to develop the briefs for all 46 venues that Cape Town needed to put into this book. And it kind of gave me the kickstart around writing briefs, understanding sports buildings in its fundamental way. And it was an amazing experience for me. I represented the bid company in places around the world, presenting the bid. Had to learn Cape Town very fast. I remember when I got there, Chris Ball, who was the CEO of the company, said, well, this afternoon there's a helicopter that's going to do a trip around all the sites with the planners. You need to get onto that flight. Never been into a helicopter before in my life, and here was I, trying to get this thing together. So it was quite an experience for me. And then I was in charge of rolling out 10 facilities where government provided 360 million rand at that time to build these 10 facilities as a demonstration to the IOC that Cape Town is okay. Well, we lost a bit. We came third, and life had to go on. So I got back to Durban. And the interesting thing is that I got a call from Eugene van Vuren. And we always laugh about this, is that on the cusp of democracy, I gave Eugene a job, which meant it was like still part of the whole kind of throwback of apartheid. And some 7 years later, or 6 years later, Eugene gives me the call to be part of the team that needed to roll out the facilities for the Cricket World Cup. which was hosted in 2003. And this is one of the first buildings that we looked at as a firm of architects, was putting on this top floor of the Kingsmead Cricket Ground North Stand. Now, all of this, I learned a few things. One is that these things need to happen pretty quickly. For one is we had the off-season in 2002 to deliver this facility. And there was a Pakistani tour at the end of that year. So you had to finish this thing before then. And the opening was at the test match hosted in Kingsmead for the Pakistan-South Africa Protea game. So it was the World Cup wasn't the first game that but however, it provided us with a good test venue. This was all done in a period of about 6 months. And you can see, together with Rob Young, our engineer, we did all of these things with a kind of very little wet trades. It was standard panels, cladding panels on the building, standard sheet materials. That we had a coil on site that was rolled on. I guess at that time, 20 years ago, these things were very seldom done, particular with buildings of this nature. So it was quite a thing for us. And also it ended up being the longest long room in the world until Philip Cox asked me how long it was while we were doing the ICC. And he made the one in Melbourne just slightly longer. So this was that building. I mean, I think it's held its own. It's covered with Hollywood Bets branding right now, but we'd hope that it's stuck being this kind of white building at the top of the top floor of the North Stand, kind of reminiscent of a side screen in cricket. Then we got involved with this thing, which was the ICC Arena, with Mike being the project manager. Design led by Design Workshop. Andy and Yanina took a personal role in putting the facade and the form of this building together. Our role was to look at this thing, was to look at the seating bowl and how it would work for events, look at areas where one would provide change rooms and green rooms and the like for many events, and it went beyond sport. And to look at how VIP areas and the big arguments around how these things are located, and also around sightline conditions, and we had debates around these as well. But it was a great experience for all of us, I think, and for the city. It's just a pity that this thing's not marketed well enough through the years. And I guess we can blame the pandemic now for the lack of usage. But in the period that it was, one would have expected that a lot more international events would be hosted in this thing, because it's one of the few places where there's 8,000 seats in a facility. Now, going back to that earlier chat or the earlier description that I had about my life in Cape Town, gave me a foothold of this thing. So when I got the call to join the team to roll out all 10 stadiums, I must admit at the time, it was a no-brainer for me. Got the call from government. You've got the experience. Please join this technical team. Write the briefs. Look at the cities. Try and see how best they could put their stadiums together and so on. And I put my hand up and I said yes. And then as the design started kind of unrolling, I just felt, well, did I actually make the correct decision? Should I have actually just got my fingers in the design of these things? And I was jealous, I must admit, when these things started to come off the drawing boards. But FIFA, it was one of the first places where FIFA sent a forwarding party to a World Cup country. They've never done that before. 10 people here in 2005, because these guys at the bottom end of Africa are clueless around putting stadiums of this kind together. So we've got to show them how. And the first question I ask is, okay, please tell us what we need to build in its minutest detail. We need to go to the cities, because this is national funding, and tell them exactly what it is that you require at a minimum to host the World Cup. And we were given this 4 language, which is a 4 official FIFA language book, which is a coffee table book that explained nothing. There were no descriptions of spaces. There was literally nothing. So of the 5 people that sat on the technical team, I was the kind of hitman, and I just went at these guys, insulted them about a 100-year-old organization that's battling to do these things. And a couple of months before the 2006 World Cup, I get a call from the director of competitions, Jim Brown of FIFA, saying, well, how would you like to sit on an international team to write the FIFA requirements? So I thought there was a bit of a catch here. Might be a way of actually keeping me quiet. I put my hand up. So off I went to Zurich, and in the group were Murray Bainan, who's probably done over 350 before he retired some years ago, sports stadiums around the world. And at that time, he was doing the refurbishment of the Madison Square Garden. So we sat down and we did this thing. And strangely enough, it's because of my experience in Cape Town with writing briefs where we took Knut's initial handwritten notes and detailed rooms and used that as the basis of developing this into quite a detailed manual, which became the kind of reference book from South Korea to Ecuador, and any query of whether there was a corner flag situation or a change room size went past our desk here in Durban. So we're pretty proud of this thing. It's still being used by people all over the world. The World Cup was an incredible experience for us. And I put up this thing on the GMP, Jensen Jankovic, and Noma and Osman Lang, and Tulisi and Samang all played a role in designing this thing. And I know when they started it, we only got them to look at the manual after they'd actually begun the design. So it was also quite a lot of retrofitting in their planning work. But I guess for our city, I was asked once what I thought about it. And I said, well, if you had to ask me to put hand on heart, it's a great thing for the city. It's a kind of like image of what Durban is about. But if you had to ask me to put my hand on head, I would say that we should never have done this, and we should have fixed the largest public toilet that Durban's got across the road in this thing here. I don't know if you can see my cursor, which would have been better for the city from a cost point of view. But anyway, life goes on, and I thought, well, we designed nothing through the World Cup, and when we have the opportunity of doing the platform for the handing out of the trophy, we jumped at it. And this is the day of the World Cup final. I'm pretty friendly with even the Dutch supporters, and you can see Gons there standing away, not even acknowledging the poor Dutch guys. For obvious reasons, if you look very carefully at the scarf he's wearing.
The Spaniards.
Yeah. And then we had to have our own arch as well. So we did this year, which was a training venue for the World Cup. It's Sugar Ray, it's in Claremont. And we fought like crazy to get the city to fund both roof coverings to the stadium, but it still has remained just the west stand roof that's on. And this whole roofing structure cost us 5 million. If you compare that to the arch of the Moses Mabhida, that's above 100 million just for the arch. So, and then a couple of years later, while we were still working, and this is serendipitous if there ever was one. So here was I sitting with Murray Benen, who's done more than probably 150 ice hockey venues and ice places in the world, writing the FIFA book. And at the end of our meeting, he would go into another meeting in the room next door, and there'll be a lot of screaming, and he'll come back, look very flustered. And every 2 weeks, we'd meet in FIFA, and the same thing would happen. We'd work during the day. There'll be a meeting in the afternoon. He'll go into the room next door, lots of screaming and shouting, and he'll come back looking flustered. And I think after the third time, he said to me, literally turned to me when he came back, he said, "Hey, have you done a ice hockey building before?" And I said, "No." He said, "Have you done a hall?" So I said, "Yeah, no, I did a bit of work on Durban's ICC arena." So I said, "Yeah, okay, look, it's the same bloody thing. We just have to put an ice plate on it. I think these guys have paid $150 million. Please help them." So I said, "Okay, let's see what we can do." And off we went. I met with a client who was in Plenia, one of the largest construction companies in Europe, who'd paid their deposit. And they said to me, "Look, we know we're catching you in the end of this thing, but just for reputational reasons, we have to put in a bid because we're trying to create Russia as our new market. So we don't care whether we win or lose. We know we're going to lose, but we need to put in a document and a design to this for this construction-led, literally construction-led competition." So we came back to Durban, and on the flight back, and again, there's these strange things happening. I pick up an English-speaking Russian newspaper, and I open the thing, and the first thing I look at is that one of the oligarchs has just bought back the centenary Fabergé egg. And I thought, oh, wait a minute, this is a good idea. So came back to Durban, sat down with Carl, and these are Carl's sketches. I still can't draw, and Carl just draws beautifully. And he put this thing together after a discussion we had about how we think that this building should unfold. And off we went. Looking at it, this is the site plan. The ice hockey site is, can you see my cursor? It's over there. And the stadium, which was going to be hosted for the opening and closing ceremony, and all the other buildings, speed skating and so on, where we're located in this Central Olympic Park. Sochi is essentially split into two parts. There's the coastal ones that are on the Black Sea, which house the indoor venues. And then there was the mountain venues in the Krasna Polania mountain range, which is about a 40-minute drive away from here. The Russians just went crazy with this city, spent billions of dollars with new rail movements, rail networks back to Moscow, high speed, links up to the ski resorts, spent huge amounts on hotels, and built all of this stuff brand new. And what this place was, when I first got there, was a pig farm. So quite a transformation of what this place was. And so we worked with Moscovic and developed this thing, because what happened is that we put in a bid, we were up against the usual suspects, populists who were then HOK, and Ellaby Beckett, there was Arab, strangely enough, not GMP, but another German company there. And we were up against all these guys, and there were eight different contractors leading designs. And so we went in, and I was pretty relaxed in the presentation because I thought, look, I've got nothing to lose here. I'm not going to be. And guys would come up to me and say, so what's your name again? Because I'm not part of the usual suspects. So I was pretty relaxed, went in, presented with the 8 other group of contractors, left the meeting, came back to Durban. And a couple of weeks later, the contractor gets a call that they've made the last 5. So they said to me, look, we made the last 5, and we'll continue with your appointment. Please just kind of like develop it a little bit more and do a few more images and so on. And Carl got busy smashing these things together. And at the time, he was a kind of world champion in Form Z. So these things happened pretty fast for him. And put a package together. Again, I put this thing under my arm, grabbed my laptop, and off I went to Russia. Again, relaxed, because the contractor said, look, we know we're going to lose this thing, so don't worry about it. Just be relaxed. And I had lots of fun with the jury. And they were all obviously laughing about this kind of person of Indian origin from the foot of Africa, bringing in an ice hockey building for Sochi for the Winter Olympic Games. I, at the time, didn't know that there were 6 players in an ice hockey team. And saw my first ice hockey match live in Moscow. So it was all new stuff. So I had a lot of fun with the jury. At the end of the presentation, they said to us, let's just stand outside, call people in individually. People came out with varying degrees of grimaces and smiles on their faces. And we just thought, well, okay, we're going to call one of these guys and give it to them. And at the end of the 5th one, within 20 minutes, we got called in. Said, well, this is yours. I had a shock of my life. Shocked for a whole host of reasons. One is that one needed to put together a team to do this thing. So that was tough enough. And it was a great experience for us. And this is the plan of this thing at ice level. It needed a warm-up plate, ice plate, and all 8 change rooms had to be in the building because there's 8 teams that play in a kind of round-robin basis for the Winter Olympic Games, and they all have a permanent home in the main ice palace. So they all had their own change rooms and would come in at varying times to do training and so on. So it was quite a complex plan to put together, plus having to deal with the media. So the media and can you see this cursor of mine when you put their hand up? And the media came in from that end. We had the VIP at the bottom here, and the players essentially came in from across from the VIPs, so that they could access both the warm-up plate as well as their change rooms. And then there's massive plant that goes with the ice hockey arena, because just the plant to keep the ice at a particular temperature, a particular hardness, and all of those things create complexities. And just to add to the complexity, this building was on a fault line that ran from the north of Russia through Moscow, through past the Black Sea and into Turkey. So on this fault line, putting in a building of this size with very little tolerance. All of the staircases were essentially sheer walls. And these things just grew up as the building got out the ground. So this is the entry level for the spectators. And as in all sports buildings, you split VIP entrances, players' entrances, media entrances from the general public. So this is the general public foot entry points. And the one thing that I insisted on in the planning of this thing is that we needed to have wheelchair access to every single level without a lift. So every level is accessed by these ramps, and you can see them on the ends of the buildings. They've accessed every single floor at a gradient of 1 in 15 at that time, which was comfortable for somebody to essentially push themselves up the ramp, because we had various places of refuge to stop and handrails at various levels for people in wheelchairs to pull themselves up the ramps if they couldn't be assisted, if they didn't have the assistance of somebody pushing them up. And that for me was very important about accessibility. And it was the first time in the Olympics that they had this. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. And as we climbed up, we got into the various suites. And you can see the dominant feature, again, even on this level, is those staircases, which we couldn't compromise. Even the section is quite dramatic. You can see we've split this thing up on a podium so that the spectators enter at the higher level. The volume of the level below had to take in buses and trucks and Zambonis. That's the trade name for the thing that actually keeps the ice going, that they drive on. And just the volume of this building. And if you compared it to the football stadium, just in width and length, it's as big as a football stadium of 40,000 people. But it housed 14,000 spectators. And it just grew. So this was this thing, it's stuck on its own podium, and you accessed it with massive staircases and ramps around it, multiple entry points. Buses could get up there. Just to give you a sense of scale, this is not a model, and that's a real luxury bus coach. And this is this thing just before the Olympics. It just sat there on its mound, proudly. And this is something else that we did. We said, well, let's try and reverse the whole idea about what heat and cold is. So when spectators came in, we tried to kind of create an ice cube type feeling with these massive ramps that linked every one of the levels. And just by playing around with the balustrade glass to create this kind of coldness within that, so that you want to go through the space quite quickly, so that you get inside it, which is then got these red Russian seats, which gave you a kind of different kind of warmth within the building. And then this is one of the exhibition matches just before the World Cup, which was held in 2012 as a forerunner to the 2014 Winter Olympic Games. We're very proud of this thing. There's some big hitters there in the jury. You can see the signatures on these certificates of Thomas Bach. And we were the only guys who got award for architecture as well as for accessibility. And I, at the award ceremony, had a long chat with Sir Philip, was probably one of the biggest activists for accessibility in the world. And this is not just sport, for everything. And he's been an outspoken person around accessibility of government buildings in the UK. And that's why they changed the entire policy around how people access buildings, people move in the streets, all of those things were quite important. I mean, on the jury were people like Gilbert Philly, who was at that time the just recently retired Secretary General of the IOC. There was Klaus Manel, who's currently still the CEO of IACS, which is the International Association of Sport and Leisure Facilities. A whole bunch of doctors and of architecture, particularly in the sports building arena. We were pretty proud of it. And then every year when there's the Russian Grand Prix, I would get somebody call me to say, well, hey, we've seen your building. Enthusiasts who watch Formula One. And this is Louis. Louis, I'm also going past our building in his first win of the Russian Grand Prix. On the back of that, a firm of architects from Turkey got hold of our book, of the FIFA book, and called FIFA, say, well, look, we need somebody to help us because we don't kind of do football stadiums all the time, but we have a client in Krasnodar, the Gralitsky brothers, who are rich oligarchs who've just bought FC Krasnodar, who play in the Russian Premier League. And they want to build a new stadium, and they've asked us to participate in a competition to recommend somebody for us. And we got the call in Durban. So off we went to Turkey, Gons and I, and went to Turkey, sat down with them, did all the planning, worked out all the site lines, did the entire seating bowl, and flew to Krasnodar to meet the Galitsky brothers. We sat down in the meeting, did the first presentation, and the guy says, well, actually, all I want is the Colosseum. I don't want any other building. Just take the Colosseum and give us that. We couldn't quite do that. So we lost this one to GMP. And if you go on the net and look at the Krasnodar Stadium, you can be your own judge. So this is what we submitted to the Galitsky brothers. And I think we came a distant second. And then the Tabanglu, the firm from Turkey, were then invited to participate, actually not invited, it was an open competition to put in a bid for the Japanese national stadium, which they would have built for the Rugby World Cup, and then use the same stadium for the Olympic Games. So we participated with them. They invited us. They said to us, look, we like working with you. You deal with all the sports planning stuff. And yes, we can look at the architecture together. And they had a young guy who had just come back from the US doing a master's in design at Harvard. And he kind of led the design, didn't know anything about the stadium. So Gonzalo and I sat down and worked out all of the planning that needed to go with this thing. So we put in this bid for the Japanese stadium. And you can see we're also pretty biased. That's us. That's the Springboks looking on the All Blacks, because we anticipated that was going to be the final in 2019. Not quite, but yeah, and I have to show the Japanese flags though. We have to sneak that one in, but we managed to sneak in the Springboks confronting the All Blacks in the haka. And that was our number 1957, and this is what it was, a 4-panel submission. So you had to put in 4 panels, and all of the stuff had to be on it, from the concept of the dewdrop right down to, we then put in seating bowl sightline diagram that showed the sightlines, and then all the planning stuff that went into it, from the lowest level, working all our way up to the top, showing it in rugby mode, primarily with the athletics track as well as a drop-in after the Rugby World Cup. And this is what this thing was. I mean, it was a carbon fiber shell, all lightweight, and it all looks pretty flimsy here. And mark my words, this thing was looked at by Hanif Kara from AKT engineers based in London. And Hanif Kara still is the only engineer who teaches at the Harvard School of Design. And it was great working with him. And he's got an African connection because he was born in Africa to an Ismaili family in Uganda and was kicked out and landed up in the UK, studied engineering. And he's now one of the top structural engineers in the world. So it was a wonderful working with Hanif Kara and just trying to understand the way that this man works. We did all the right things, put the right words in. You can see it's pretty poetic stuff in the submission. And we made it down to the last 5. And Zaha won that. The jury was Norman Foster, Richard Rogers, and Tadar Andu. So we were pretty proud of this thing, coming 5th on the kind of like centerpiece of both the would have been the World Cup, Rugby World Cup, and the Olympic Games. Well, even the Finnish stadium was never used for the Rugby World Cup, and I think the debacle around that stadium is pretty much public knowledge. Okay, now this happened a little bit earlier than that bid for the Russian for the Tokyo stadium. We were then invited on the back of the fact that we'd been working on the World Cup in South Africa. We were asked by the Russian Football Federation to help them put their bid together for 2018. And again, in the middle of winter, in February of 2009, Gons and I joined a group of consultants, a firm of architects from Germany, a guy called Tim Hooper, and Most Project 4, who were a local Russian firm. And they essentially were the government agencies, and they then became private companies during Glasgow. And sat in this private jet, and it was only after about the 3rd city asked, like, who owns this private jet? Only to discover it was owned by the chairman of Chelsea, Roman Abramovich. And we were, the temperature ranges were just phenomenal going to some of these places. I think this is Nizhny Novgorod, and the temperatures in the winter, in the middle of winter, is -45 to -50 degrees Celsius. Not something that I'm accustomed to. I kept kicking Gons out of the bus to go and photograph the site. I wasn't too pleased. This is Samara, another town. These are stadiums that we designed for the bid book. Let's put these things together pretty fast. Every one of them had a different bowl, seating bowl. This one had a kind of standard seating bowl. This one, we biased the seats to the west so that you could reduce the amount of seating capacity after the games to a number that people of Samara could look at. This is quite a dramatic stadium. We look back at the city. The city's over there across the bridge. So another one in Yaroslavl. Again, a totally different arrangement. Backing up or putting all the permanent seats to the west, and a totally temporary thing across the street for the games. So they would shut the street off, and that would be part of the overlay. And we put this thing. Then we went to the furthest east in Russia, where an Olympic venue was identified, and this is in Yekaterinburg. And we looked at this, and it was a protected wall. And if anybody knows anything about Russian history, Yekaterinburg is where the last Tsar and his entire family were murdered. So they're pretty precious about their buildings. And this yellow thing is there, and we have to protect that. So what we did is we just put this massive disc over it, and the columns to get the additional seats in. And you can see additional seats go out the side of the building, but we still kind of like kept it within the confines of the building in the bid book. And that's what we thought it would look like at night. Quite a dramatic thing. Very, very inner city building. So we were really restricted with the overlay design, but we made it work from an overlay. And this is what they built. Kind of took our buildings, I think, took our drawings, messed it up a bit. And this is what they ended up building. But we had to take it and then do the overlay for it. This we had to work on as well, which was Luzhniki, and this was built for the 1980 Olympic Games. There was an old stadium there before then, and it was a massive refurbishment in 1980. And this was used for the World Cup final. And we did the overlay for this particular building. That's on access to one of the Seven Sisters in Moscow, along the Muscovy River. You could see it here in the middle ground. These are the things that we kind of developed in the office after 2010. Working with Nusli in 2010 on developing the new language of overlay design. And we helped the Russians put together 5 of their stadiums to create the tournament mode. These are I'm just doing the overall master plan, but each one of those areas had to be detailed individually. So it's an architectural undertaking on its own, a planning exercise, which is pretty complex, making all these things work, working with pretty strict Russian security detail people to make this thing kind of comply with their quite strict requirements. And I've put in 2 here, and this one is in Samara or Saransk. This is Saransk. Again, quite tight sites, water bodies all around, and trying to get these routes into and out of this area quite, as comfortably as possible, getting all the hospitality areas to work as well. And it was great to be there. This is my own photograph, believe it or not. It was on final day in Luzhniki. This was during the time of the singing of the anthems in the France-Croatia final. It was absolutely phenomenal. And even if I have to say this myself, it's probably the best World Cup I've attended. I've attended a couple of these things. Then the Commonwealth Games. I think it was a kind of leaf out of the Cape Town book. And the city was approached to do this thing, and there was kind of misbelief that they could do it in the time that was available. It went across the Christmas period, and we had to secure the document and get it submitted by mid-February. So there's people working through their vacations and so on. I was called by SASCOC to look at initially just kind of briefing this thing, and to look at how one could put together the bid. So I said, well, look, the only way we're going to do this thing is if we engage teams of architects and all consultants, from project managers to engineers to quantity surveyors in the city, but very different from the Cape Town one, where we paid the consultants nothing to put together documents for the bid. I insisted that needed to negotiate with both the provincial, national, and local government to get funding so that we could pay people to actually do this work, because you're actually taking away their holiday. That was the one thing. And the other thing that I insisted on is that everyone who wanted to participate here gave us their full, they did nothing else besides Commonwealth buildings, and they had to go back to their client. And for that, we actually paid the premium, and we were quite comfortable with that. I'd even told the client, that's what we're going to do. Is if you want this thing, and the time available, that's what you do. You just don't treat consultants with disrespect. And we managed to put these things together. So this was Glacial Finlayson, which we chose as the final for the swimming. This is something that we did. And then Dean J, because along the promenade, he'd done one of the buildings along the promenade, and right across from that building, which we would have used for much of the accommodation, was the beach volleyball. So they did this. Dean J, just put a few in there. And this is the existing, the team that put together Moses Mabhida. We asked them to look at the athletics. They had to put in the drop-in track and so on. And then to look at the specific overlay that was associated with the Commonwealth Games and athletics, which is very different to football. So all of that planning had to be done by members of the team, which was some 48 different consulting firms. This was the village up in Marshall Dam. And then I'm going to spend a little bit of time on this one. We took part in this competition with Mott MacDonald. Mott MacDonald asked us to be part of their team to lead the architecture on this thing. The Mauritian government put out a bid for a multi-sport facility to host the Indian Ocean Island Games of 2019. And I remember going to the presentation was June 16th, 2017. And we did the presentation, and we kind of came out of the room, and they already told us that, look, you came second because Arab won this thing. We said, okay, all good. And off we went. Arab withdrew because they couldn't believe that they could do it in the time available. This is 2017, where we attended not the briefing, it was still the competition phase. Months later, we get a call from the Mauritian authorities to say that the first guys had pulled out and whether we'd be keen to do this, but the timelines hadn't. We eventually built. You can see them all white, and you'll see the colors change just now. And this is one of the renders that were put together by our team with the walkways. And again, it's a simple sports planning. VIPs at the lower level, all spectators at the upper level. You split those things, and you can get security and all sorts of things working very, very well from a functional point of view. So it's an initial design for the pool, with this roof over, all built in concrete. Likewise with the stadium. This was the plan, and you can see it's pretty tight. It's surrounded by a river, the main motorway to north of the island, to the Grand Bay area, along here. And it had to accommodate these 4 major sports. So the seating capacities that they gave us were quite excessive, and everybody wants to build a national stadium with huge numbers of seats. And what we did was actually convince these people we spend on the players' facilities the world's best athletic surfaces for athletics, for football, the best swimming pool, built by the best swimming pool builders in the world, and the best multi-sport floor that one can find. So that was the basis around which we put this thing together. And all of these things have to work as one and individually. So one's always aware of how one split this up in a post-games environment. So we have to be conscious of those things in the design of it. Just some of the images. And as the design developed, we realized that we can't do this thing in concrete, not on the time that we had available. So we changed to steel, kind of midships. And we're still now in 2017, fiddling around. We're going to get construction starting pretty soon. And the design was still being developed here. The Chinese contractors were being engaged in the tenders were out. There were various Chinese contractors that put in bids because that was part of the funding. The Chinese funded this thing. So part of the deal is that you put out the bid to their people, their construction companies. So, for instance, at SAIA, who we work with, Chinese construction and engineering company, is the largest construction company in the world. 2 million full-time workers. There is no construction company. And we're not even talking about their day workers and so on. Again, Carl, putting pencil to paper, putting together these sketches, went on this big thing about the red-tailed tropic bird being a kind of driver of the design of the roof. And the one thing that I kind of like insisted on with the football stadium was to put a ceiling, because I always, with the stadiums that I went to, I've always hated looking up at this kind of spaghetti structure. There's some of the images on the inside, and you can see the colors are starting to change. We're getting more into the detail. People started getting more conscious of things that are close to their heart. Green walls were introduced. The client was starting putting pressure on us around the environmental things. Then there were the time pressures of actually putting this thing together. And then we hit the site. And we thought, all's good. We can just throw a big slab here and put this thing together and all will be fine and we'll meet the deadline. And then the geotechnical reports started to come back. And the client literally gave us a bowl of custard. It was the most number of piles I've ever seen in my life. They were like soldier piles across this entire site. You can see remnants of it there in the middle. And each one of these things had massive numbers of piles that would go in. And anybody who does buildings of this scale will know what it does to your program. But anyway, for a gun to head, we went on, pushed on, threw resources at this thing like you can't believe, from people. The Chinese construction company were working 16, 17-hour days. They're unbelievable workforce, working in multiple places across the site, on multiple buildings, and within buildings having various teams doing different things. I mean, if you take just this here in the foreground, this is the indoor hall. So the seats and the facade had to go up at the same time. And it just went on and on. I'm waiting for time. 9 o'clock. And this thing.
No, we're still good, Ruben. You can still go on.
Yeah. Okay. And we kind of just kept going. And this photograph is significant. This was our offices. Can you see my cursor? Those were our offices. And this is where the entire Chinese team lived, the contractors. They had their compound with their own cook. And most of these things, this entire thing was temporary and air conditioned and had all the trappings of comfortable living. This was literally an on-site office for the entire consulting team. And we worked right next door to the contractor. So we were on top of each other, trying to do details. And these things went late into the night to resolve these things as they went on. And yeah, I mean, like, look, the view from the stadiums were spectacular. The mountain, just over the mountain there is the capital, Port Louis. This is in the middle of the country, a place called Saint Pierre. And this building just grew. This is the three people, and you can see that's Barbara Muru and Ella Harvey from our offices standing next to this giant. And you'll see him just now, is Andre Vessels, who was the principal project manager from Mark McDonald, played lock forward for the Cheetah. So it was great spending time with him, because we also watched rugby on the weekends. And the stadium started to emerge. And at the same time as the cladding for the stadium roof and the ceilings were going in, the contractor for the pitch had to do. And this was the first hybrid pitch put into Africa. It's a hybrid pitch. It has both a synthetic as well as it's overseeded with grass. So this is the seeding material that it's laid on. So the grass goes through the synthetic pitch. It gives you multiple uses during the week, and the maintenance is not maintenance free, but it's a lot more predictable from a stadium, from a grassing and quality point of view. So we're getting closer now to the games, and we had the stadium done, and it was ready to go. We could have hosted the final here with 5,000 seats, and we could have taken some temporary seats and hosted the final. There was just an arbitrary photographer in Mauritius just came around and took these dramatic photographs of this facility, kind of like selling it to the government, and I hope they bought it from him, poor guy. And then we had to do a cover over the highway, because there's a problem with Mauritians, for some crazy reason, with every bridge that goes over highway, stone cars and drop things over bridges for reasons unknown to us. And we had to design this cover that went over it. So that's why you'll find this in some of the aerial photographs across the highway. This is the main concourse between the athletics and the football stadium. Thought this photograph is just beautifully dramatic as it frames that mountainous view across the concourse between the football and the athletic stadium at the end. And then the Prime Minister loved this thing so much. He had a golf day, because he's a big Liverpool supporter. He studied in the UK. He's a PhD in law. And Prime Minister Praveen Kumar Jagannath then invited Ian Rush, who was a famous Liverpool centre-forward and also part of the academy and a patron of Liverpool, to a golf day. And at the golf day, invited him to see the facility. Ian Rush calls the authorities of Liverpool, and before we know it, they chose it as one of their centres of excellence as one of the football academies. And that guy, if anybody knows football in Liverpool, was their famous African goalkeeper. That's Krobala. And because I'm a Manchester United supporter, I insisted on calling him Gary Bailey. And you could know that went down very well. That's at the launch of the academy, and the main entrance to the stadium, where the Liverpool Academy vans were parked. Yeah, I think I just put some of these photographs in just to show the complexity of these things. just this one of the columns that held up the roof for the pool, the aquatic center. And at the top of it sat a base plate with the primary truss. And this guy, Andre Wessels, is 6'8" inches, way over 2 meters. Just to give you a sense of scale of how big this base plate is. And the way that the temporary props were positioned in order to get those trusses in. Barbara Muru having fun with, she's a graduate in this thing that I don't understand, parametric design. She's done a master's in that and had a bit of fun doing this roof over the stadium. And the Chinese contractor didn't bat an eye. They just built it. And as it came up, this highly shiny metal ceiling that we put in reflected the water. You can see it already, like quite reflective surface. These things happened really, really quickly. This was just, I think it was two days before the games began. And there was testing and some of the warm-up stuff that I think, and the testing of the technology and so on. And the game started. You could see this like the spectator shot, a view of the facility with the setting sun just over Port Louis. Quite dramatic. There's the reflection onto the ceiling, all the water. So if you can think about this thing, it's like this, a moving ceiling, plus it's undulating parametric design. One of those columns that held up this thing. From the other end, looking back at the spectator seating with the VIP on the one end and the control systems at the other. There's more shots of the people in. This is the main entrance at the lowest level. The players and media to enter the facility. Some of the change rooms just lifted the level of design so that these things kind of like things that people could be proud of. This is the start of the gym. The steel structure going up, the skeletal of the steel structure, and then the cladding went on. All of this stuff manufactured in China, brought in by ship and installed on site, kind of mechanical way. This was the shot just the night before the start of the judo competition in the indoor hall. That's Ayla walking around doing final inspections to the main foyer area of the gym. That's the tatami mats for the judo competition. It's looking the other way, the seating bowl. There's a VIP lounge in the gym. Change rooms within the gym. And these are shots that I got from the contractor now during lockdown, because we couldn't get there. And the pitch. The crazy part is that we had this thing done in less than a year to have the pool, the gym, and the football pitch ready for the games. But we didn't do the athletics track. And it's taken us the better part of 2 years to get this done with the pandemic. It's just been a nightmare trying to finish this thing off. It's in a more finished state, kind of. You can see the gardens are growing. I just was driving back to our apartment the one day, and I kept looking back at this thing across the sugarcane. And it just brought memories for me about looking at Hans Holland's building on the ridge across the sugarcane before they put those buildings in front of it. It gave me a sense of, well, it's a similar kind of feeling, looking across the sugarcane and there's these almost buried buildings. I remember a debate in the office around why Gons and I insisted on lowering these buildings instead of making them prominent. It is for these things. It's for these things that somehow these memories stay with you for a long time. So yeah, so this is what this thing looks like at the moment. For some reason I can't get that. I'm going to try and get the video to work. Just wanted to show you this because it was a video put together by the client. Come on. Can you see this?
Yep, it's coming through, yeah.
Can you see it?
Yep,
okay, let's
yep.
watch the dates. I'll try and see what I can pull it through. It's a 3-minute video, but I'm gonna try and scrub it a bit. But just watch the calendar. Just you can see this is night work. It went on for many, many days, many months. And just the culture of how they work. I've got 2 screens, that's why I'm not seeing my head. And just the way that these things are put together. Sometimes the managers come out and take photographs. All these guys are managers, would never have held a spade in their lives. Engineers, highly qualified guys on site. Like, it almost looks funny with a hand of a bolt that big. And it's already January. On the 19th of July is the games. Yeah, and as we march on, putting these things together, trying to sort out the parking areas. And this is already April. And this is an interesting thing. That's the Prime Minister going around with the chairman, and I'm trying to sound vaguely intelligent and trying to promise him that, look, we'll make it, we'll do our best. He kept asking me whether it's going to be ready, and I said, well, it'll be ready, R-E-D-D-Y. Yeah, so as Barbara bossing around the Chinese contractors, this thing goes backwards and forwards just to give people a sense of where it started and what it became. And I'm scrubbing it. Sorry, guys, I want to do this thing quickly now. Yes, just in terms of how this thing unfolded. And the trick of the seats. Yeah, this is our bowl of custard. We made it work. Yeah. That's it. And then, and how's this? Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's my last slide. If you remember footage of the video, and one of the engineers sent this to me in the morning. It's a newspaper called La Express, which is really critical of the Mauritian government. And in it, it's me screaming at the contractor where the hell is the stadium and the parking and the whatever else in Flint Creole? And the Prime Minister shouting, "Where's my ribbon to cut?" And the picture in the background with bits of rebar sticking out of the ground during that walkout. But we hosted the event. Guys, that's my story.
Fantastic, Ruben. Thank you so much. Well worth the wait. Unfortunately, we've had challenges and all that as well in starting this morning. But thank you so much. I think one thing that comes to mind is definitely we actually, as a country, as a province, have not, I think, celebrated your work enough. We do not know much about your work internationally, and which is why I think that this presentation was actually quite important. A few sessions back, we had spoken about maybe breaking down awards into categories, and in that way we may try and not leave out anything, and not to say that I feel there may have been overlooking of things in general, because we have looked at things like new buildings. We have looked at heritage work. We have looked at even there was a practice that had won an award for restoring one of the towers in the Edgar's building in town. So there has always been that attempt from the award committees to try and capture everything. But even more so now, I think we do need to put our awards into segments, international, etc., so that we make sure that we don't miss anything. But incredible body of work, Rubes. Incredible body of works. Thank you so much. Colleagues, I'll just thank you so much for the attendance. We've never hit 90 before. We've had 99 people log in today. This is absolutely amazing. I guess the other 39
it scares the hell out of me.
The other 39 with the registered, I guess didn't get the link which came in again. May I please have a question or comment, please, on what we've spoken about? Richard, I'll volunteer you.
Sorry. Morning, everybody.
Richard Stratton, I mean, yeah. So.
Oh, sorry, man.
Any Richard could have.
Yeah.
Thank you, Rubes. I'll take on my role as designated speaker of platitudes, following on our great president. Not president of, I mean the president of the country with platitudes. About my political statements. Rubes, it's always been fun knowing you and always been fun working with you. I met you first when I was a student and my father was working with Janina and you were hanging around in those offices and at the top of Glenwood Drive. It's just so heartwarming for me to know that there's people within our community who've reached so far. It really gives me a sense of, I don't know, that we have place and that we have meaning, and on a global level. I know I'm not using the right words here right now because I've been put on the spot, but it just, your confidence and your ability, the way you speak, the way you can just bring up dates, facts, names of faraway places, the information your mind holds, your ability to drift so far in architecture. I was called by somebody yesterday or 2 days ago who was talking to me about the work I was doing with them. And they just said, it's really nice that you think more about than just the building. And Ruben, you don't just think about the building. You don't just think about more than that. What goes on in your mind, what you can hold together at one moment in time is incredible. I'm completely blown away by You must be very intelligent.
Must be, yeah.
Must be. And that you represented us
as all the people on this room.
Thanks, Ruse. But you know, that you represented us as our provincial president, and that you're going to represent us as our national president through incredibly sad circumstances, notwithstanding. I'm glad it's you. I look forward to the transformation and changes that are possible. I sent Skura a note the other day just to say how much I appreciate the way he communicates with us as a community. I think it's humble, generous, and really engaged. And I think that the number of people that have turned up today is really testimony to a mark that you set as president of the Provincial Institute, and the baton that has been handed on to Skura. And I think our community is growing. I think our community is strengthening. And if we can all start thinking about more than just our buildings, if we can also start thinking about the externalities and the effects that our buildings have through social and economic and environmental changes and upliftment, and the understanding of all the impacts that we have as architects on every level that we work at. Great strides have been made. We hardly even started, but I think we're strengthening as a community, and I think it's got a lot to do with your vision and how you can think as a global human being. As architects, we often argue about very minor details of things that in truth don't matter. The impact and effect of our buildings is very often so much more important than the color that something might be, or whether something is resolved to look. I look at these housing estates that are springing up around Durban, and I go, to me, the contemporary style that's going on in the moment is just the same. They're just another set of Tuscan buildings with different window shapes. Architects need to think more about what their buildings do than what they look like. You guys set an amazing example in that, and I thank you. And I'm going to shut up now. Cheers, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you so much. Adima?
Morning. So I think first, Skura, you chose the right person to go first, because I think Richard had a lot of lovely words to follow on from Ruben's presentation. And just quickly, congratulations on the award, Richard. I think that, so first to say that the closest that I have to sporting references is not very close at all. I don't sport, but I do Bikram yoga. So while I think I missed a lot of the sporting references and the names of people, I know Miguel was kind of laughing at me a little bit earlier, but I think I'm maybe more closer to the redness of Russia than the sporting references. But just, I think, you know, we've had in very close proximity the sharing of your work of Gita Govan yesterday on the webinar, of Karuni at the previous practice breakfast, and a little bit from Luyanda and Mpeti at Mtembeni's memorial. And I think what it reiterates is this knowing that intimate knowledge is both a resource and a challenge, particularly from our Black architects. And yeah, I just echoing Richard's words on community and transformation and what that means. And just looking at the audience today is incredible. And the length and breadth of your work is equally incredible in terms of, I think, not just the built practice, but just in stretching the kind of definitions of what it means to engage as an architect is incredibly inspiring for me as a younger architect, as a youth, to kind of laugh at Skura a little bit. But yeah, I think just, it's really nice to have this sharing, and it's incredible. I mean, while I definitely don't get the sport bits at all, and I'm not going to pretend to get them, it's just incredible to watch, because we don't know, you know, I mean, we know you, we know your personality, and I feel very privileged to be close to you and your personality, and what you bring to the profession. But I think we don't know your work, and so these practice breakfasts have enabled us to see so much more, particularly as younger architects. So thank you to Skura. And maybe just another thing to share in passing. Yesterday in Mpeti at the SAIA National webinar kind of was talking about the neuroplasticity between the different genders and talking about the proximity of the hippocampus in women in the female brain, and saying that we have an easier way to navigate between left and right, but we also have an easy way to navigate between memory and imagination, and that we cannot have imagination without memory. And so I think it's very important to reflect on this as a collective, as a community, and also to inspire perhaps an imagination that's lacking within the pseudo-Tuscan housing estates. So yeah, thanks very much for
I think just on the point of the issue around being a feminist myself, but in concrete terms around what I do as an architect, and not just about talking about it, is that site in Mauritius. The two women, one age 27, the other one 34, and they ran the project for our firm of architects, with Gons and I flying in every so often to have meetings. But they basically ran the project. The client would default to Barbara constantly. And there was a confidence there around the people that we had on the ground. And I think it's a culture that I come from, around exposing people to projects at every age group, and also around being completely aware of the fact that the gender issue within our profession is a hard fight, and it's a fight that needs to happen. But we must fight it.
Thank you, Adima. Thank you, Rubes. You partly answered.
Comment.
Prof. Just a sec, Prof.
Okay.
Hello. Can you? Rubes, you partly answered my question. I wanted to ask about the materials, and you did say that they come from China, because I wanted to find out if it's something that's you work out what you want to achieve. For instance, the pool, the reflective feature that you had, or whether it's something that you came from a catalog, from where you know that there's availability, etc.
Yeah, there was a couple of ways of doing that. One is that we had to look at speed. Barbara and Ayla, on two separate trips, flew to China and visited factories to make sure that these materials were available and that they could be shipped soonest, and that they could understand our design, and that we looked through the shop drawings while we were there. While they were there, sorry, not me, I didn't go. And made sure that these things were available, because we had massive time pressure. You cannot build, that's $130 million worth of building. It's not possible under normal contracting environment to put together that value of building. That's spread out in slightly over a year.
Right. No, great. Thanks. Professor Adebayo. Prof, I thought Prof had something to say there.
Last speaker, sorry. Ruben, thank you very much for your presentation. I really enjoyed it. Even when we were doing the, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, Prof. Loud and clear.
Okay. Let me quickly show my face for you so that you guys know I'm here, because I have a different something by the back of my distance. That's why I didn't want to use the video. I give all this international thing all over, so I don't want to confuse issue. Now, what I see from Ruben, I'm very happy with what you have done. And I think there's one lesson, because when we listen to all these things, we must be able to come out with a lesson. In architecture, and in the built environment. I think Ruben have demonstrated that the architecture is not relegated to one particular environment. The whole world, the whole landscape of the world is where we can insert our architecture. And I think that's one of the first things in my early days when I was in Europe as an architect and even as a student that our dear professor used to mention, which I follow the same thing. All of you will see the work I've done all over Africa and other works, maybe at a later on my book that will come out. But for what Ruben have shown to me, this is really a good encouragement. Because when we see every day, we debate about decolonization, colonization, and all those, I have no problem with that. But there's a time for us to stay, we exist in this world, that we should compare the argument with the rest of the world. Because I remember when the Commonwealth came to the university, they said, CAA, they want to do evaluation and those. I said, when are we going to come from Africa and evaluate you also? So that is what he has demonstrated, that the knowledge we have in this part of the world can be planted everywhere and is of international level. So I think that is very good encouragement. Instead of us fighting for one little project in South Africa without not going to the rest of the world. So I'm very, very happy with that. I thought I was the only crazy one who move around, but I've seen someone who work in the same aspect. Even though he shows a stadium today, I know there will be other projects that he has done because of the time that he will not be able to show us. I'm very happy. I didn't want to go into the issue about the architecture or all those things because there's a lot of nice thing and language that it seems to me that you begin to develop with your organic, with your form and all those sort of things. But I think you didn't have time to go into all those debates. Maybe that's something we'll take at a different time. I'm very happy to see that. And congratulations. And I'm encouraging everybody to also take the same step. Some may be doing it, but the young one, please don't think you are only trained to be in South Africa alone. You are trained for the whole world. Thank you.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you, Prof. I know that we have students from UKZN who joined us today. I don't know if there's a question from any student. Well, one delay, you're not a student, but you'd like to say something. Tiane.
Hey, hi everyone. I just want to say yes. Yes, I just want to say a great presentation and great conversation, especially with everything going on with COVID and us having to rethink what architecture is for. But also more importantly, understanding that our work and our service is, to the global world, not just to our context. I guess maybe my question would be, what's the advice you have for sort of young architects coming up who are looking to get into the profession and get their feet wet? What are some of the things that when you look back at Ruben, you would have done differently or you would advise them to do?
Lovely.
You mean besides choose another career?
Yeah.
Look, I don't know about doing things differently because I can't see myself doing I think the one thing that I might have done differently was behaved a lot better at the School of Architecture. And Wally's on the call. Because I think it was a kind of, for me, studying architecture was, I treated everything cynically. But it was a political decision to do that. And I know that Karuni, during the first, or was it the second, transformation, Many Voices seminar, raised the thing about re-educating ourselves. And I think that's what I've done in practice. is actually re-educated myself because of the way that I treated my education, with a level of cynicism, just did enough, spent lots and lots of time being an activist. But I think it was a different kind of experience. That's why it's a difficult question to say whether I would have done something differently. What I did do, though, being Black in South Africa, is make a conscious effort to do something where the competition for me was reduced. I knew sport. I played sport. I come from a family of sport politicians. And because of that was a way of saying, well, how do I translate that into my profession? And I chose sport. Now, if you think that in sport, one could count the number of people involved in sports architecture in South Africa, small. I speak at conferences around the world on sport. And it's the usual suspects. We know each other. It's such a small community of sport architects. And it's about identifying as a young architect, what is it that makes your skill a unique one that you'd like to present to the world? And sometimes uniqueness isn't all good, because we need people to do a multitude of things in South Africa. But I think for me personally is what gave me that edge around a uniqueness around sports architecture. I don't know whether I've answered it or ducked it.
No, that was actually pretty good. Thank you very much.
Lovely. Thank you, Ruben. Thank you so much. It's amazing that some of the comments, especially from Richard, Ruben, was not only about your work, but also about what you've done for the profession. So it's actually great to see that it is an example that as a leading architect, you don't only have to have great designs, but you also have to have a way to interact with people, develop the industry in terms of the structures that help us practice better. So that is really, really great about your career, and wishing you well as a upcoming SAIA national president.
I don't know what I signed up for. Don't know what
colleagues, I don't know if anybody else has something to say. We have gone beyond the time, but I think we had to. It was a really great presentation, and we started late a bit. So unfortunately, I'm sorry about that we had to go over time a bit. Just one announcement is that the letter that I circulated in regards to restoring infrastructure that's been bent in the last commotion that we had a few weeks back, noted on. So the Teguni municipality says that we definitely can submit plans if they are not changing from the original layout. And once they give us the go-ahead to build, they will try by all means to make sure that we get a certificate of occupation within 10 days. So as architects, we cannot necessarily change the situation or enter the battle to win back our country or our province, as it were, from the craziness that has happened. But we can certainly play our part as professionals to make sure that at least with what we can do, what we are qualified to do, we make sure that we are on top of that. Yeah. Don?
Thank you. Just a few words. Ruben, you've broken the ice many times and you've impressed many people. And I hope and I'm sure you're going to motivate some young architects, because one thing I think you've shown to, if you travel the world and listen and watch you can come back with good ideas. Thanks again. You've broken the ice many times. Well done.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Don.
Thank you for your words, Don.
Thank
you so much.
I think I must also thank the people that were part of our organization. As Ruben Reddy architects, I think without people past and present, we would never have been able to put this thing together.
No,
I think
thank
all
you
of
so
them.
much, Ruben.
I even owe them, even for the volunteer positions that I've taken, because they held the fort when I wasn't around.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Ruben. Any other comment I'm leaving out, colleagues, before we close? There's a suggestion on the comment section, Ruben, to put this all together in a book. This wonderful portfolio that you have from Somers. Yeah. What do you say about that?
That's more work.
No, great. Thank you, colleagues. We're now at just past 9:30, and thank you so much for your patience, and thank you for logging in. I think it's been absolutely wonderful. Yes, absolutely. It's been really good. Thank you so much. Have a good weekend, and thank you again for logging in. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, people.
So meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Well done, Ruben.
Thank you. Bye.
Mm.